Update: my best friend has been missing for 4 years. 2 weeks ago, I started getting messages from him. Part 2. Thank you all for your advice on the last part of this, and apologies that this update is coming later than I intended. I needed more time than anticipated to mull over what is going on. I feel I should clarify some things that were left out of the last post. I understand that some of you were concerned about the seemingly odd meeting location. I should have explained it in the original post. Accept my apologies for that. In early 2006, when C and I were 10, a new library was built in our town. The old building has sat empty ever since. We steered well clear of the inside because that was typically where the local junkies congregated to shoot up, and, even in our wildest days, we didn't particularly want to become mixed up with that. But out the back there was a patch of land, a garden, of sorts, with benches and trees, where people could sit and read in the summer. When we were kids, we liked to go there because it was a place we could have a kick around without worrying about our ball being nicked by older kids. When we were a little bit older, we liked to go there because it was sheltered and out of the way enough that we could drink underage without worrying about being caught. We made a lot of memories in that garden. It made sense for C to want to meet there. Anyway, about the meeting, I took you guys' advice and let a friend know that I was going out. I deliberately omitted that I was apparently meeting C, because I didn't want to cause too much of a stir. Just told her that I was going out to do something important, and that if I hadn't let her know I was safe within an hour and a half to assume I wasn't and contact the police. I also took the largest knife from my kitchen on my passenger's seat, just in case. I originally thought that suggestion was a little too far, but I did find it brought me some comfort to have it there with me. I arrived at the library shortly before 10:45. I wanted to be early in hopes that I'd be there first, but no such luck. C always was punctual to a fault. As soon as I'd closed the old rusty gate behind me, I was greeted by a voice that's heart-achingly familiar. Can't believe you're still chugging around in that shed on wheels. To put it kindly, C looked a little bit worse for wear. His hair, once his pride and joy, washed and deep conditioned every other night like a ritual, was tangled and greasy, in a half-hearted top knot. Where once he'd been lean, he was now painfully thin, and where he'd once been pale, he now looked pallid and sickly. But he was still C, and he was still beautiful. He still had those deep-grained doe eyes and that charmingly wonky nose and those cupid bow lips. And I couldn't help myself. I punched him in the jaw. At first he looked shocked, offended, confused. Then, his face split into a shit-eating grin and he started to laugh. Yeah, probably deserved that one. Where the fuck have you been? There. He stopped laughing. He sighed, closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry, Ren. I never planned to be gone so long. Honestly, didn't think it'd take this long to. He let the end of his sentence drop off into silence. His apology was so sincere it made my heart hurt, but my anger hadn't faded much. To do what? Can we get in your car? I want to be sure nobody can hear us. Reluctantly, I agreed to it. He burst out laughing again when he saw the knife on the passenger's seat. I'd tried to scowl at him when I shoved it into the glove compartment, but Christ almighty, his laugh has always been infectious. When the laughter died down, I asked him again, where the fuck have you been? His response shocked me. I've been out looking for my mother. If you didn't read the last post, allow me to fill you in. C's mom and dad were young when he was born, 18 and 16 respectively. His mother passed away when she was 22 of a cocaine overdose that is suspected to have been deliberate. After that, C's father blamed and resented him to the point of hatred, and would regularly beat the shit out of him after downing a bottle of whiskey. I reminded him of as much and he just shook his head. I asked what he meant by that. With a groan, he buried his face in his hands and muttered that I'd think he was fucking crazy if he told me. I think you're fucking crazy for disappearing for 4 fucking years without warning. Tell me, can you drive? I'll feel better about it if we're moving. I don't know why I listened, but I did. I'm sure plenty of you will be mad at me for it. How did I know I could trust him? Truth is, I didn't. But C has always had that effect on me. When we were kids he could suggest the craziest, most nonsensical plans and I'd always agree to them. So I drove with no particular direction in mind, and he started to explain. Note this is quoted from what I remember him saying, and if I miss any details I'll fill them in as I remember them. Remember my grandma died when I was 17? I found a bunch of Mom's old diaries at her house when she did, and I learned a bunch of stuff, like, well, there's a reason that my dad treated me the way he did, and it's not that he blames me for Mom dying. Mom isn't dead. I know, don't look at me like that. Thing is, well, when Mom was a kid, her family were really badly off. My grandfather was a real piece of work who drank all of his money. They basically lived off of what my grandmother made as a waitress. 2 adults and 4 kids to feed, on top of bills and the rest of it. They were in poverty and fucking miserable. One night, Mom's about 9 or 10 and she's out playing in the woods by herself, and she meets this thing, and it tells her it can fix shit for her. All she has to do in exchange is be its friend. He paused there, took in a deep breath and held it for a while. He looked like he wasn't sure how to continue. After a moment, he closed his eyes and went on, slightly faster in pace, like he just wants to get it all out and over with. So she agreed. She said she'd be its friend and it agreed to take all of her problems away, which it did, except in the most horrendous ways that it could. It killed my grandfather, I've redacted how he described it. Too fucking horrific, even for this site. My gran got a life insurance payout that was enough for them to live comfortably, but she was plagued by bad luck for the rest of her life. Failed relationships, bad health, losing people she loved. Mom begged this thing to stop, to let them live in peace. But it wouldn't. It promised to take away Mom's problems, but it didn't promise that it wouldn't hurt anyone else in the process. And it was so jealous. It hated anybody Mom got close to, tried to push them away, drive them out somehow. She'd promised to be its friend, and it didn't like to share. Most people weren't strong-willed enough to resist its attempts to get rid of them. Then Dad came along. He loved her so fucking much, Rin. He didn't care what it did. He stuck with her. God, he went through it for her. And this thing isn't stupid. It realized it wasn't getting rid of him, so it turned on her. It latched itself onto Dad not long after I was born. It loathed me more than it did him. Dad was just a boyfriend. I was her flesh and blood. It wanted me gone. But it's not human. See, it doesn't really have an earthly body. Couldn't get rid of me by itself. So it tried to use Dad to do it. It made him tell her all sorts of awful things to do to me. Thank God she never listened. But like I said, not many people can resist it. She didn't trust herself anymore, so she faked her death, meticulously, and then took off to try and outrun it. He stopped, out of breath, and flushed. We were silent, the only sound a soft hum of the engine. It was maddening. After a while, I broke it. And then? What? I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. He sighed. I found Mom, about a year and a half ago, he said. She's stopped moving around so much now. Settled down. She says this thing is still attached to Dad, that it can't do her or I any harm as long as it's still with him. There's a safe way to get rid of it, but she didn't want to risk coming back. So it's up to me. You do think I'm fucking crazy, don't you? I think you're absolutely fucking mental, to be real honest, mate. I told him bluntly, but I believe you. You've never lied to me before, and I don't think you're starting now, are you? Fuck, I love you, Rin, he sighed, rubbed a hand over his hair. I knew I could count on you. What is it you have to do? It's a lot to explain right now, he sighed. I just know I need to get to this thing before Dad croaks, or it's gonna be bad fucking news for Mom and I. Fuck, it's late. Can I crash at your place for a couple days? Don't really have anywhere to stay around here anymore. I agreed to let him stay, because he's so of course I did. And that's where I'm at currently. He's spent the last 24 hours or so scribbling things down on pieces of paper and muttering to himself about plans between frequent strong black coffees and infrequent 20-minute naps. It's nice to have him back, honestly. Even if he is scaring me, he's finally getting a proper sleep right now. He looks so peaceful, so tranquil. I'm glad he's back and I'm glad he's resting. There's just one problem, and I just haven't got the heart to tell him. His father died in a car accident a month ago.